In 1978, an astronaut crashed into the Earth but brought an uninvited guest with him.
Sputnik is a 2020 Russian horror film that plays around with many different paranoid ideas as its freaky alien plot unravels. Today, we'll recap and review the events of this film. So let's check it out.
We open with two Russian astronauts aboard the Sputnik satellite. One sings an old folk song and talks about what he plans to do when they get home. His first plan is to have a hot bath, and the other is more tight-lipped about his plans. Their satellite detaches from the station and begins to descend to Earth. The displays start to flicker and alarm sounds as their descent starts to go wrong before quickly settling down again. The two laugh at their brush with fate before they both spot and hear something crawling outside their craft making its way to the entrance hatch. Back on Earth in Soviet Kazakhstan, the ship slowly descends on a parachute down to Earth where a farmer finds them both. One has been brutally killed, his helmet smashed in, while the other, Konstantin, crawls from the ship covered in blood. In a government institute in Moscow, a hearing begins. A board of officials interview neuropsychologist Tatiana about the case of negligence where she has apparently held a patient underwater to cure his seizures. The board is unhappy, but she insists she did the right thing. Regardless, she is fired from her post. As she hands her ID, she is met by a man called Samirodov. He wants her to come with him to review a patient. She agrees and is flown by helicopter to the secret location where the patient is housed.
He reports to her what we all saw on the satellite, and that the surviving astronaut is suffering from amnesia. After landing, they're driven to a top-secret research institute to the sound of ominous drums.
Konstantin is in the middle of a hypnotherapy session as Tatiana looks on. The hypnotherapist asks him his name, but he can't recall it. He says his name is Robert. It turns out he's immune to hypnotherapy and is treating the session as a joke. He says he will go on a hunger strike until he's told where his fellow astronaut is and what's happening. Tatiana enters his chamber. Taking a seat, she offers him a cup of tea. He recounts the event of his mission and how everything went according to plan, but following the descent to Earth, he remembers nothing. Finally, he gives her his mother's number and asks her to call her to say he is safe. Tatiana takes her tea back and leaves. She says he has the symptoms of PTSD, plain and simple, and asks to leave first thing in the morning. A guard shows her to her room, and she attempts to call Konstantin's mother. But the base can only make internal calls. Only Samirodov can make outside calls.
She showers and later goes out for a run, and then has a run-in with a strange soldier who refuses to let go of her hands. The whole sequence of her sitting in her room, showering, and then out on her run, it all serves to add to this alien, uneasy isolation of her experience.
Samirodov comes to her room and brings her back to Konstantin. They watch as he convulses violently and appears to vomit up a strange alien organism. Covered in slime with two spiny tendrils, it crawls along the floor. Samirodov lets her meet the creature up close, and she observes this freakish alien creature through the glass, which observes her back before attempting to attack her. Samirodov explains the creature leaves his body every night and that Konstantin doesn't know about it. He has brought her in because he appreciates her ability to do what must be done. She agrees and demands all evidence of the creature with daily 2-hour sessions. A voiceover from Samirodov plays over her research and reveals that when they attempt to remove the alien from Konstantin, he loses all vital signs but also offers him increased healing and metabolic abilities.
Inside him, it shrinks to a very small size, and then it leaves him at the same time every night for up to an hour. Now, this voiceover sets up an interesting original sci-fi premise that is unique and intriguing.
Tatiana inquires about the whereabouts of Konstantin's son to resident Dr. Jan. Unfortunately, he's unfriendly and unhelpful and tells her to ask Samirodovich. Meanwhile, at an orphanage, we see a young boy attempting to steal the keys to the home before being told off by a nun. Konstantin and Tatiana have their first meeting. She tells him the staff thinks he's lost his mind and murdered his fellow cosmonaut. He refuses to believe it, of course, and demands a further explanation for why he's been brought there. She pushes him on why he abandoned his son, knowing that an illegitimate son would be a black mark on his hero's record. This irritates him and he calls an early end to the meeting. She says that Konstantin needs to be allowed to associate with civilians during the day so she can get a clear picture of his medical state. Shown to his room, Konstantin switches on the TV and catches back up with the news, seeing that he is being kept in a rehabilitation center. Tatiana visits him and he reveals he didn't know he had a son until a week before he left Earth and that he'll get him when he is freed. That night, Tatiana goes to Konstantin's cell to observe the creature. She lies down in front of the glass and the alien imitates her. It notices a toy with a bell inside that Konstantin keeps for comfort. She calls for them to raise the glass, trapping the creature. Semiradov agrees and she's placed inside a protective suit that looks like an astronaut suit. Breathing heavily, she enters the room the creature is housed in. She gives it the toy and it slimes over to it, wrapping it up in its body as though it's embracing it. As she leans forward to touch it, she slips and the creature attacks and pulls her into the room. The team activates a strobe light to stun the creature and pull her to safety. Semiradov comes to her room and she explains that the toy means so much to the alien because it's important to Konstantin and reminds him of his son. The longer the alien spends inside Konstantin, the longer it comes out. Eventually, it won't need to use him as a cocoon.
She insists she must be taken to Moscow, where they can use better research methods. Semiradov denies this. They're isolated so that in case the creature grows too powerful, they can destroy it.
Tatiana interrogates Jan while watching back the footage of her incident with the alien. She's convinced it doesn't just eat what he does, but Jan is unhelpful and tells her nothing. When she insists he drive her to a spot near the site where a man is being dragged into a giant cage, he's one of the inmates brought in for hard labor on the camp. She watches secretly from the car as the creature is released into the cage with them. It clicks and slithers its way into the cage closer to the whimpering inmate before leaping on him and killing him instantly. Later, Jan reveals that they tried to feed it, but the creature only thrives when fed with human flesh. It also needs its prey to see it first, as the cortisol hormone brought on by fear spikes, and cortisol makes the creature strong. Tatiana invites Konstantin out for a run the next day, and while they're out, she reveals what's happening to him and what he brought back with him. He says to meet him at 1 a.m. the next day. He pretends to take his nightly sedative but brings it back up that night. He crushes it and goes out to the hallway to speak with the nurse. He tempts her into watching a film with him and spikes her. While she sleeps, he escapes into the base and meets up with Tatiana. They find their way into a lab where they see evidence of creatures' killings, and Konstantin reveals he knows everything. He remembers everything the alien sees and does when he wakes up the following morning. If Semiradov found out, he knew he would never be allowed to leave, so he has to keep quiet. He begs Tatiana to stay quiet for 2 more weeks so he can go home, but she's unhappy about it and the further deaths it will cause, making Konstantin aggressive. Tatiana is brought to Semiradov by the guards, where they both get on the same page, and she reveals that she knows they are feeding the creature people. Semiradov is indignant and reveals the pasts of the men he has fed to the creature. They are all criminals and deserve no better. He says he will bring her to a feeding station to observe up close. Another prisoner is dragged into the cage, and once again the creature slithers toward him. Tatiana demands to enter the enclosure and stands between the creature and its prey, telling herself not to be afraid. It attempts to intimidate her, but she stays brave and the creature doesn't attack her. Instead, she sings to it, and while this stops her from being attacked, the prisoner is less brave, and as he tries to escape, the beast goes for him.
And with this breakthrough, Semiradov convinces Tatiana to work with him and continue their research.
Speaking with Jan later, she covertly tells him they're planning an escape and will take Jan with them. He says he won't come with them, but later he assists her in an attempt to get away. She gets to Konstantin and tries to give him a cocktail of hormones that will trigger the chemical effect of a disease that will make the creature leave him. That will buy them time to get to a hospital or somewhere they can get the proper treatment. Konstantin doesn't want to leave though. He says the creature saved his life and that it is his punishment for abandoning his son. She tells him his son's name is Lyosha and that he will be 7 years old next week. Being reminded of his duty to his son, he calms down and reconsiders. They escape to a car that Jan has left for them. Meanwhile, a guard spots the sedated guard and rushes to investigate. They're spotted on CCTV, and Samirodov orders Tatiana to be shot and Konstantin to be captured. Jan makes an outside call on Samirodov's line and reveals what Samirodov has been doing just in time before Samirodov bursts in and shoots him. Guards surround Tatiana and Konstantin. He calls for the syringe and injects himself with it, releasing the creature. It looms over the soldiers and dives out of the way as they open fire, laying waste to them all as it leaps from shadow to shadow. Tatiana bundles Konstantin into a car and speeds off. Samirodov confronts the alien at the base and shoots it, sending Konstantin into a spasm in the car as he vomits up blood. She drags him from the car as he lies spasming on the ground. Then she looks up to notice a truck driving towards her. Samirodov jumps out. She points her gun at him as he approaches her. Soldiers bring a case out containing the alien to attempt to bring it and Konstantin back together. As Samirodov threatens her, it springs to life and kills the guards before leaping on Samirodov and ripping his face off. The creature crawls back into Konstantin and brings him back to life. A motorcade of cars approaches and Tatiana watches. Konstantin shoots himself, knowing there's no life he can make for himself. Time passes and Tatiana arrives at Lyosha's orphanage. We realize now that the child we've been seeing at the orphanage this whole time hasn't been Lyosha, but Tatiana as a child raised in the same orphanage as Lyosha. Lyosha is let out to Tatiana and she embraces him as the film ends.
The Soviet Union is always a fascinating place to set films, as we are introduced to the strange world of shady offices and government secrets. This sci-fi horror film brilliantly plays on those realistic aspects of Soviet life, while also mixing it with a well-designed, frightening creature and believable, relatable characters, each with powerful motivations. This is a tightly scripted and fast-paced horror film that brushes over many different genres and doesn't let up from the very beginning. Please subscribe to our channel to be notified when we upload, and don't forget to suggest movies that you want us to recap in the comments down below.